So it's 10:33. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Travel Information Meeting, October 2021. Glad to have you all here. So my name is Kelly McGarry with Travel Services, and I'm joined by Teresa Athen, who's the Assistant Director overseeing Travel Services, as well as the Procurement Customer Service team. And then also we have April Berger, who is a compliance analyst as well, and she will be presenting a little bit later. So just some kind of like housekeeping type things. So if you do, just so you know how we'll be handling questions, we are using the Zoom webinar feature within Zoom. So Zoom looks a little bit different than you're used to. That is why. And so how we handle questions is there is a Q&A button that's in the ribbon. So if you have any questions, that's where you'll be submitting questions. And then just kind of how we'll handle the questions in general. If you have any questions, specific to what we're presenting on, we will first get through the slide just to present it, and then we will address that question after we've presented that information. If you have any kind of more general questions, I know a lot of times, just some general policy questions will come up, maybe not related to what we're presenting on. Those we will hold until the end. If you think of something and you want to ask, feel free to ask during the presentation. That's fine. We'll just hold off until the end. And then at the very end is when we'll have, kind of that Q&A for open to any sort of questions. So that's how we'll be handling the questions. And then also, just as a reminder, this session is recorded. So we will be sending out the recording after the meeting. We usually get it out usually like 1 or 2 business days after the meeting. So you can expect to see that kind of post communication after the meeting. We also send a PDF copy of the slides. So if you have anybody in your department that's unable to attend, just know that, we'll have that recording and you can share it with them. And let's go ahead and get started. Go. So we sent out a communication already about this on the listserv. We just want to send you a quick, or let you know, just a quick reminder. There is a live UW sustainability survey related to travel. So they're conducting a survey to better understand attitudes towards travel sustainability. So this survey is kind of mostly geared towards travelers. So if you're able to, if you could share this survey with your travelers, that would be greatly appreciated. It takes approximately 10 minutes to complete. So if you do share with them, just let them know it would take about 10 minutes for them to do it. It will be available until October 15th at 5 p.m. So that's when the survey will close. So they're welcome to take it anytime up until then. And then we do have the link. So it's bit.ly/UW air. So that will be the link for them to take the survey. When we send out the post meeting recap, we'll include that link within the email. So if you don't feel like jotting it down now, just know that we'll have that link when we send out the communication as well. So if you want to just, copy and paste it from that email, we'll be sending it that way as well. And if you have any specific questions related to the survey, so the survey is coming from the UW Sustainability Office. So this is not a survey that we came up with. It's coming from their group. And so if you have any questions, if you're curious about kind of the purpose of it and those type of questions, then those type of questions would be best directed to Maggie. She's the one who created the survey and is kind of managing it. So feel free to email her if you have any questions. So next, we're going to kind of talk about our travel services expense report reviews that we currently do. This is going to kind of set up for sort of a new process that we're also going to be taking on in this space. But first, we would just kind of want to remind, what we're currently doing, because we haven't really presented on this in a while. I know the folks that are, currently working with expense reports are, very aware of kind of what we do, but just in case, we have any new folks or anything like that, just going to let you know what exactly we do with expense reports, and then this new procedure that we will be taking on after this meeting is over. So currently we are flagged for expense reports in Ariba, and those are based on predetermined flags within the system. So if there isn't any of these flags, the expense report just goes through the department approvals. We don't get added to the approval flow. So it's based on what information you entered. And we do have this information on the website as well. But our current flags are if there's personal time. And kind of before I go through the flags, I'll mention that our approval doesn't constitute a complete review of the expense report. Our focus is mostly on whatever had flagged our review. So if you do see us on the approval flow, just know that, because there's been some misconception of this over the years, that does not mean that we will be reviewing, every detail of the expense report. If something, catches our attention, or maybe it's a little bit concerning, then maybe we will do a more thorough review. But in general, our focus is on, what actually flagged our attention. And so one of them is personal time plus airfare. If there's personal time plus car rental. So looking for things such as the comparison airfare, maybe for car rental, making sure if there are personal days that it's, prorated to business time only. Non-incidental supply is kind of like our catch-all line item. And sometimes we see some interesting things go through that. So we like to take a look at those. If they're non-US, so if they're a foreign national, if they're on a B2 or W2 visa type, there's some policy related to how many days they can be reimbursed. So we're taking a look at that. Anything to do with the advances, we usually get pretty involved with. And then meals paid for others, one of our riskier expenses. So if it's greater than $75, we're taking a look at those. Not sold driver, that would be when somebody gets a car rental and they add additional drivers, making sure that all the drivers are on UW Business. It's part of our policy to make sure that's the case. And then airfare change fee. So taking a look at some of the UW Business reasons provided there. And then with some of the airfare upgrades is something we're looking at as well. So that's kind of, that's what we're currently doing. And so that's going to set up for kind of what we're going to be now doing moving forward as well. So before I get to this next slide, I will mention that this process is not going away. We're not replacing this new procedure with the current procedure. We will continue to do exactly what I just presented on, but we'll be doing a bit of an additional review to what we're doing already. So we will be starting a new post-process expense report review effective this month. So I know we have some other units, at the central office level that do more of a sort of post-process review. We will be adding that as a procedure to what we're doing as well. And that will basically be effective this month. So right after this meeting is when we're going to kind of start to compile those reports and start working through them. It will be a random 120 a month starting at January 2019 and moving onward. So that's where we're going to go back. We're going to start looking at January 2019. We have kind of this reporting Excel function where we'll just be pulling a random 120 from that entire month. And that's how we'll be, that's where we'll start. And then, when we move to November, then we'll start looking at February 2019 and then moving forward. I do see I have a question, but I'm going to get to that as soon as I finish the slide. This is in addition to our current process of reviewing live expense reports flagged for us. So I already kind of mentioned that. And then kind of how we'll be handling the notification is we'll be notifying the preparer and the compliance approver. We'll be notified of any errors that are found. And kind of how we'll handle like our notifications will be sort of a case by case basis. You can expect our comments and kind of what we'll be saying to be sort of similar to what we do with the current process, where we're maybe asking for a correction, asking for documentation to be attached. Let's say we come across the conference exception to, per diem. We notice there's no documentation attached for the conference exception. So we will be reaching out, requesting that documentation. And I'm sure folks may be wondering, why we're doing this in addition to what we're already doing. And kind of the main reason for that is, because of COVID, there's been a reduction in ERs. So we're kind of compensating for a reduction in ERs. We want to keep making sure that we're reviewing, plenty of expense reports and for audit purposes, trying to protect the department from audit and all those type of things. And also, just as a reminder, expense reports are public record. They could be audited and investigated for 6 years after they're, fully processed. So, catching something or catching an error on an expense report that's a day old is basically the same as catching an error on an expense report, that's 2 or 3 years old. They're still the same audit risk because that entire period, they could still be audited and investigated by, state auditors, other auditors out there. So that's kind of a little bit of the why behind it. And let me go ahead and start to jump to questions. Would you ever audit or do extra review for blanket travel approvals? These would be longstanding travel approvals that could apply to multiple years of travel for our administrators. So blanket travel approvals, if you're talking about the pre-trip approval, that one we probably wouldn't really get involved in because the documentation can be attached to the expense report or it can be kept at the department level. If there was ever like a concern about a blanket approval, related to like airfare or something like that, then sure, we would jump in and maybe reach out to the department, just get a little bit more information. But a lot of the blankets, yeah, we may not see because of the pre-trip approval. So, and kind of like I mentioned, things are going to be handled by a case-by-case basis. If we feel like we need to be more thorough on it, of course we would, we would. But if there isn't a concern, then we wouldn't. And I'll kind of mention, keep in mind, we are not an audit office. The purpose of the travel services office is to be, more educational than audit based. So really the purpose, isn't really to audit you. This is just to protect you from audit in the future. So I just like to point that out. Will the post-audit review be just the flags or more thorough? That's a great question. So because it's going to be, we're looking at past reports, technically there isn't going to be a flag. So we're just going to be pulling, it's going to be pulled at random. There may be ones that we pull were ones that were flagged for a review. And really, it's going to be, we're not going to do like a full thorough review of every expense report that we pull. We probably wouldn't have time to do that. So it's going to be very similar in that we're just kind of doing more of a scan and looking for things that are concerning. So, since we're, very aware of the policies and everything like that, we're probably just going to be going there kind of quickly and just seeing like, looking for things that catch our eye. And then if something does seem a little bit off about the expense report, then kind of like I mentioned before, then we would maybe conduct a more thorough review. And this is kind of a brand new process. So at the very, very beginning, it may be a little bit of a learning experience for us. We're going to kind of feel out, what makes sense based on our capacity as far as time. So we're going to go in there, kind of start high level, scanning for things that are concerning, kind of figure out how much time we have on this. And, if we feel like we need to be more thorough, we will be. Next question. This is only for, let's see. How do we proceed if the preparer compliance reviewer is no longer with our department? Yeah, that's a good question. So we still kind of figure that out. So I'm sure I did kind of think about this a little bit. So there may be, we may email the preparer and the compliance approver, and we may get a kickback saying that the preparer and the compliance, approver are no longer with the university. So we'd probably then maybe reach out to the funding approver, or if we're just kind of aware of who the department is, we may reach out to someone we know in the department. So that's how we'd kind of handle it. And if we absolutely can't figure out what department it is or can't find it, then maybe it would have to sort of be, brushed aside. We would probably do our best, check the approval flow, look for other, because sometimes there's watchers, there's funding approvers, and those sorts of things. So we would just kind of reach out to other folks in the department. This is only for reports that aren't flagged during the initial submission. So that's a good question. So this is a completely separate process from those that are flagged currently in Ariba. It will be based on pulling a report in Ariba. So there's a way we can pull a report based on the month. So we're starting at January 2019, pull all the reports from that month. I'm going to do like a random function within Excel. It's going to pull 120 randomly, and then that's what we're going to look at. So it's not based on any like flags in the system. It's just we pull a report, do a random function, and then that will give us our list, and then we start working through those. Would you suggest keeping 6 years of travel records on file? I would say that's actually more than a suggestion. So there's what you want to do is just make sure you review the policy that comes from UW Records Management. So there's a whole another office called UW Records Management. They manage, what you need to do as far as record storing. But I can say, travel needs to be on record for 6 years, because an auditor, if something's 5 years old, an auditor, based on our record retention policy, could request that you pull the expense report, provide the receipts, all those type of things. And if you go to our receipt page on our policy page, it's got some information there. And you can also, and that links out to information regarding UW Records Management on what you need to do. Okay, I see a question that can wait till the end, so I'll hold off on that one. Do units need to do something if errors are found? So yeah, that's a good question. So it'll be a bit situational for sure. But I would say for the most part, yes, there will be a correction that'll probably need to be done. For example, like I mentioned, yeah, if we find like a documentation that's missing based on our policy, then then the department should be doing what they can to get that added, because like I mentioned, it could still be, even though it's 2 years old, it's still just as much an audit risk as something that we're denying on the spot. And so yeah, we'll still be kind of feeling that out. And also we did reach out to internal audit just to get a little bit more guidance, because since we normally deny before the expense report is fully processed, we were kind of like double checking with them, do the circumstances change? Can be like more educational since it's older? And the answer is we should be treating it just like we do currently, and basically applying that to these past reports as well. So if we do find something wrong, yes, I would expect you should probably expect that you'll be making some sort of correction. Is Ariba currently considered the source of record? I should be able to look up all my years of reimbursement. So yeah, Ariba is considered a source of record. If you go to our receipt page, there's a section related to record retention, and it talks about the Ariba scanning policy, and you just want to make sure that you're very aware of the Ariba scanning policy. As long as you're meeting all those requirements, then yeah, in that case, then you can consider Ariba a kind of like record retention. So next question. Also, will all my travel records in Ariba be archived or stored where I can retrieve them when we leave the Ariba system? That's a great question for sure. So I don't know like all this like very specific information on this, but I know it's on Finance Transformation's radar. I heard that for sure. And it's pretty safe to say that they're not going to just delete all the Ariba records. There is part of their like process flow to make sure that we have access to those records. They're very aware of our record retention policies and all that. So there'll be more to come on how that's all handled as far as Finance Transformation. And we should have Finance Transformation representing us later. So maybe I can have them speak to that question. I'll save that for later. But it's pretty safe to assume that you will be able to pull those records in the future. All righty. Looks like I got through the questions, but feel free to keep asking questions. I know I was expecting some questions in this section. So yeah, let me know if you have any more. All right, let's move along. So next section. So we have now added gas to the miscellaneous travel expense less than $75. So this is a policy change technically, but one that should benefit your units hopefully. And so gas is now a protected expense under the miscellaneous travel expense less than $75 exception. So this is the section in the policy where if you don't have a receipt for one of these expenses listed, as long as the expense is less than $75, then a receipt is not required. Just as a reminder, this is for each individual expense. So let's say you have 4 gas receipts that are each $25, those receipts would be protected under the $75. But if there's a gas receipt that is $79, then it would not be. So it's based on each individual one. It's not a compilation of that type of expense. So gas has now been added. There was a change at the state level policy where they added gas to that list. So that is why we were able to add it. And if you go to our receipt page, gas will be added to that list right after the meeting. I can't remember if I added it, but if I haven't, it will be added once the meeting is over, because that policy will now be live. Yeah, like I mentioned, expenses listed as miscellaneous travel expense do not require a receipt unless greater than $75. So I got a couple questions. Let me go ahead and get through those. So when is gas a protected expense receipt policy effective? Oh, so yeah, I just mentioned that. So that it will be effective right after the meeting's over. So when you go to the receipt page right after the meeting, you will see gas listed there. Can't remember if I added it already. If I haven't, it will be added immediately after the meeting. Is this in addition to or instead of the mileage? So for that question, so this is, so the only time gas is reimbursable is in regards to car rental. So this is kind of addressing something different than mileage. So for mileage, we require that you follow our mileage policy where you're attaching documentation, you're going based on the federal mileage rate. The federal mileage rate covers the cost of gas. So it's not allowed for a traveler to turn in a gas receipt and be reimbursed at the mileage. And we require that you reimburse it as mileage. So you can't, whenever it's mileage, you can't just reimburse the gas receipt. There is one section that says you can document it as mileage. You can reduce the amount down to the gas receipt amount as long as you followed all the steps and documentation requirements for mileage. That's okay. But really what we're talking about here is gas for car rental primarily. That is when gas is reimbursable. So it's a little bit different. For gas, can you add for each day, like $40? Because I'm not exactly sure what that's getting at. If you mean like making an estimate as far as the gas amount, that we do not allow. So just in general, when it comes to the miscellaneous travel expense policy, we do require exact amounts. So a traveler should not be saying like, oh, I think it was around $25. They should, determine what that actual amount was and let you know. They need to go to like a credit card statement and kind of verify. For multiple entries for gas, is it protected? So yeah, so let's say there's $40 each day, then you'd be fine. So it's just based on each individual instance of the expense. If it's less than $75, then you're good. Another question, can we do comparison between mileage and airfare when airfare is cheaper than mileage? So yeah, there's a part of our policy related to when a traveler chooses to like drive versus fly. So you'll want to make sure you check that out. Usually it's part of the like pre-trip approval. They should verify, whether if they decided to drive instead of fly, then you would use the basis of like flying as the comparison. We would need to be reimbursed whatever's cheaper. Sometimes people need to drive. There's like a business reason they have to drive. That should just be like documented as part of the pre-trip approval, like why it was required. But if they're doing it for personal reasons, then it needs to be treated like a personal decision. And we should be reimbursing what the cost would have been for had they flown instead. So that's kind of how that all works. All right, great questions so far. And yeah, if you have any questions, more questions related to that, I'll jump back to the slide, but I'll go ahead and move along since it looks like I got through those ones. And yeah, that's actually the end of my section. So I will now pass it off to April, who will be taking it from here. And I'll go ahead and stop my share so you can go ahead and share your screen, April.
Can everyone see my slides in presentation mode?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a customer service question that we've been receiving a little bit lately. So we wanted to just provide some general guidance. It's not a policy, but just guidance to help answer this question. So it's in regards to COVID quarantine reimbursement, when it is allowable and when it is not. So as a general practice, UW Main campus is not going to be paying or reimbursing staff to self-isolate in hotels. Self-isolation would be up to the employee unless it is a requirement of the trip. And the main thing to pay attention to is to differentiate between travelers asking to quarantine versus it actually being a requirement of the business trip. These are the questions that your department should be asking in helping the department determine whether they should be reimbursing for a traveler's quarantine. Did the traveler have no option to decline the travel? Was the travel absolutely critical? If we were not in a pandemic and a traveler was, say, on a personal vacation, or they had a planned personal vacation and the university required them to cancel the trip to go on this business trip, if the answer to any of these questions is yes, then there would be consideration for allowing quarantine expenses to be reimbursed. But then there is another layer of questions that would need to be asked, such as, why was it critical? Were any remote options available? Obviously such as Zoom. Does the funding allow for it? That's usually one of the most important, is if the funding allows for this type of expense. And then we always like to caveat that whenever making a determination, that if you do allow for one traveler, you do have to allow for all travelers in like circumstances. So in allowing this, you are setting a precedence. So that is something important to remember. We have found that there have been instances where the business actually does require the traveler to quarantine prior to the business. We've had instances where travelers have to go on ships, and obviously social distancing. There are severe limitations when you're on a ship, and it is a requirement. So obviously that gets back into, reviewing these types of questions, and, that'll kind of help narrate your guidance. Like I said, this is not official policy. This is just general guidance that we've received from HR. So I would recommend, if you still feel uncertain, or if you have any additional questions with making the determination, we are always more than happy to help, assist you with that. But we also recommend reaching out to HR, because it is kind of that gray area where it's a cross between travel policy and the employee's HR. So with that said, now I'm going to get to some questions. So I'm not seeing any questions with regards to this, so I'm gonna hold off. I'll give another couple seconds to see if anything comes through. Okay, I don't see anything, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. So travel onboarding for new staff. So we really want, you know, we know that there's been quite a few new employees, and so we really wanted to take a moment to highlight where you should be directing new employees in your department. And, you know, now with a lot of these new employees having been onboarded in a virtual remote setting, you know, sometimes it's just definitely been a learning curve for onboarding new staff. So we just wanted to highlight some of the resources that are available to any new employees to departments. And if you are not a new employee, but you know that there's someone new in your department and they will be handling travel expenses, you know, just to kind of point them in the right direction and where they can find the majority of our information. So as you know, let's see here. Give me one sec. So as you know, the travel services website is pretty much where all of our policy and procedure lives. So our number one main tool is our website. I would say that me and Kelly, we are a number two to any resource that we can provide, but definitely guide any new employees to our website. And then more specifically with regards to the training resources that we provide. So you can access these resources in two locations on our website. You can access them from the resource dropdown at the top banner, and you can go to training, or if you want quick and easy access, use this training quick link button. And we do provide webinars, and we also provide, currently, they used to be in person, but due to COVID, they have been moved to a remote setting via Zoom. So we do offer travel policies and procedures, which, as it's in the name, it goes over travel policies and procedures. And then we offer an e-travel hands-on training, which is essentially a class to teach travel preparers on how to prepare a travel reimbursement. We also provide department training. So if you are onboarding a large group of new employees and you want them to learn about the travel policies and procedures because you know they will be doing travel in the future, we can do a personalized training for your department specifically. And we have also done one-on-one trainings where it's not necessarily for a large group, but maybe like one or two people. We are more than happy to provide that for you. And then, as you know, we have these quarterly travel information meetings. We recommend that you have your new employees sign up for the listserv, because oftentimes that's how we announce these travel information meetings or any other important travel information that needs to be shared. We never spam you with a bunch of unnecessary information. We only do it when we find it's necessary or critical. And then lastly, so for those of you that have attended our travel policies and procedures classes or our e-travel hands-on training, we would love to get your feedback on what your experience was with those classes, any areas of improvement, whether it's maybe highlighting something and spending a bit more time on a specific area, or something that, oh, maybe you think we don't need to focus on so much. Additionally, we have these webinars, which are recordings of how to do certain tasks in Ariba. We also want feedback on if you think that there are any other webinars that would be valuable for travel. So, we would be happy to hear your recommendations. In the slide, which I cannot show you right now because I'm on our travel page, but there will be a link in the slides to this travel training survey. It's just a simple 2-question survey that's open text. So please, feel free to provide us your feedback. We'd be happy to hear it, and then we will evaluate and go from there. So as you can see on the slide, travel training resources, and then the travel training survey. Oops, actually, apologies, I forgot to do the questions. Okay. So, one of the questions we received is actually with regards to the COVID quarantine reimbursement guidance. So I'm going to go back to this slide. One of the questions that is being asked is, how do we know if the travel is critical or not? That is not for us to make that determination. We always find that it is the department that makes this determination. At one point during COVID travel restrictions, the guidance was to have the department make the determination whether the trip was necessary, essential, and critical, that the traveler had to go on this trip. So it would be this same situation where the department would be making that determination. This is something where, I always kind of like to look to research as a good example. They had to go on this trip because they had to collect these samples because it was a part of a larger research study, and the funding allowed for, any type of quarantine protections for the travelers. So that kind of goes back to these questions that we have listed. And I would say if the department can't really make that determination, you should also be looking to these other questions to help guide you. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so now I'm going to move forward in my slide. So with regards to the website, one of the questions we are receiving is, I think it would be great to have a webinar or recorded training specifically for UW travelers, our coworkers, and not just travel preparers. That's a great point. We do try to speak in general when we provide our travel training classes. You know, in regards to preparing an expense report, it's just how you would prepare one. But what we could do is we could try to caveat when it is for a prepare versus when it is for the individual traveler themselves. So we can always, you know, ask at the beginning of a class so that we can make sure that we're differentiating and providing the appropriate guidance. So that's a great point. So please feel free to add that feedback in the survey. So would I recommend either the policies and procedures and/or e-travel as a refresher? Are these better suited to those who are brand new? Also, have you considered offering an Ask Me Anything hour? So our policies and procedures and our e-travel class, they do not change because it is our standard practice. We always, you know, recommend, you know, doing a refresher is always a good idea. And, you know, sometimes in doing a policies and procedures class, you know, that is an opportunity for you to attend and, you know, maybe get some more specific guidance on a specific topic that maybe you've been struggling with in terms of compliance with your travelers. So, you know, that's always a great idea and a good suggestion. And offering an Ask Me Anything hour, that is a great idea. We have not considered that. So please drop that in the survey feedback. Let's see.
I have something to add to that, just like real quick too.
Sure.
Just kind of like a common question I get a lot that's like related to that question. A lot of folks will ask like, so yeah, like April said, it's, you know, it's geared towards new employees, but it could be a great refresher because it's an open Q&A, so you can ask questions during the policy class throughout. So there may be something, you know, that comes up as a refresher, it may spark a question. So it's very Q&A oriented as it is. So it's always good as a refresher. But a lot of times I get asked, you know, I have an employee that's mostly going to be preparing expense reports. Should I have them take the policy class as well? And how I usually answer that question is I do recommend that even if it's someone who's going to be focusing on compliance or just focusing on preparing expense reports, I actually recommend that they take both because if you're someone who's preparing expense reports, it's very beneficial to know the policy when you're actually preparing that report because it's a lot of times, you know, it's less work for the compliance approver. If the preparer knows the policy, there's usually less denials and everything like that. And then kind of the same goes on the other side of things. If you're a compliance approver and if you're more aware of, you know, how the system works, it's easier for you to catch things. And when you're have a little bit more expertise on how the system works. And then as a refresher, I have a lot of folks that come in as a refresher, just get a good way to see all the ins and outs of the system and may spark questions. And because it's a Q&A format, you can definitely benefit off it, even if you're someone who uses the system regularly and all that. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. This is more of a comment. A 3-hour class is too long of a class for someone who just wants to learn how to set up their profile and submit a travel expenditure. And that's an excellent point. That's why we have provided webinars. We know that all of you are very busy and sometimes don't have the time to dedicate to a travel training class, hence why we do provide the webinars so that you can kind of learn at your own pace, or if there's like a specific element that you are trying to learn how to do, there's a webinar for that. So that's why we have these webinars. So great point. And then that looks like it for the questions with regarding new staff. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. So we always like to let you know when there are updates being made to our travel website. One of the things that we had mentioned in our previous travel information meeting is within regards to the travel agencies that have contracts with the university. We had mentioned that we would be refreshing and creating a new page for them, similar to our UW Travel Discounts vendor page. And so we just wanted to let you know that that is being worked on and it will be launched soon. We just were not able to execute it prior to this travel info meeting. So we'll be sending out a listserv. So announcing the launch of that web page because we did have that travel agency expo, and there were lots of interest and lots of questions regarding each of the agencies. So this is just kind of like a one-stop shop page for you to get the necessary information that you need for our UW contracted agencies. So just be on the lookout for that. That is pretty much all I have. Let's see here. I'm going to go to questions. Any quick video training for UW travelers available, not for ER preparers? So I kind of mentioned that previously, which is our trainings are not specifically geared towards preparers. If you kind of think about it, UW travelers, if they are doing their own travel reimbursements, they are a preparer. Preparer is just kind of a general term. So anyone that is, whether it's the traveler themselves or a dedicated admin or fiscal specialist that is, preparing ERs, these webinars and trainings are geared towards them. Okay, so Kelly, I don't know if you wanted to, if you wanted me to pass this back to you. We have some just general questions that aren't related to the slides that I just covered.
Yeah, totally. So I'll take it from here. So,
Great.
So I answered a couple of questions in the chat. So make sure you check those out. If you're curious about the answers to those. Also, so yeah, John has the question about the Ariba records, which I already answered, and may get a little insight from Jason here in a moment. I just want to answer these questions real quick. All these questions are in the travel website. I guess I would need a little more clarification on that question, exactly what you're getting at on that one. If you could let me know, that'd be great. Can I ask a question about per diem rates? Yes, of course. So if you have any questions about per diem rates, please let me know. We'll get to that for sure. Can the preparer be the same person as the compliance approver? I'm guessing you're asking about like when, yeah, will the system allow that to go through? I believe, maybe Teresa can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I think if the preparer and compliance approver are the same person, it's okay, it moves along, but the preparer can't be the same as the funding approver. So no matter what, there's always at least two people, at least one person that's different on the approval flow. But if I'm mistaken on that, let me know, Teresa. Is that how you understand it?
Currently, the system allows the same person, the preparer, the compliance approver, and the funding approver to be the same. The second approver that is required by internal audit, the second review, is the traveler. So the traveler always has to review that. So those three roles can be the same. However, if the traveler cannot approve their own. So if the traveler is the preparer, then they're in the compliance or funding approval role, then they cannot approve. It has to be a secondary person there.
Yeah, that's how I understood it. So yeah, if it's the traveler, it'll like let you set that in the system, but once it gets to the point of like submit and like approve, the system will error out, because we do see that error come in. I just couldn't remember if it was like both the compliance and the funding, but I believe it's both. So that's a good question. Are there any non-UW travel requirement training videos? So nothing really geared towards non-UW at the moment, but if you have any like specific, use cases where that would be helpful to you, definitely take our survey. If there's any training opportunities related to non-UW, you think that would be beneficial. That's where we're capturing that information. So if you could take the survey and just give us some more detail of how that would be beneficial and stuff like that, that'd be great to know. Per diem rates, did they change regarding incidental? There used to be a breakout for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So there's been, as far as like what the per diem rate covers, there's been no change on that. So if you like go to our per diem section on our website, it talks about, what the different costs are that per diem covers. But there hasn't been any recent changes related to that. So Seattle is actually going to be, it's $79 now. It just went up to $79. We just updated the system with those changes. So it was 76, I believe, and now it's 79. And the system's been updated for it to break out breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know there was an error in the system at the very beginning because we needed to update that breakout, but that has now been updated. And there on the website, you'll see now that there's a breakdown for $79 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I just updated that. I think it was yesterday. And the system has also been updated. So if you're experiencing any issues with that, there was a known issue and it's been corrected. Cool. Under what circumstances, if any, can a virtual conference attendee be reimbursed for lunch? Normally that would be something that's not reimbursable. And the reason for that is, for the most part, that attendee would not be on travel status. So the reason they can't be reimbursed for lunch is they don't meet our travel status requirement. The only way they would meet is if somehow they were able to claim one of the exceptions to travel status, but usually in that circumstance, nothing would fit for that. For lodging over per diem, if the traveler does not meet any of the exceptions, can the department use a discretionary budget to cover the overage, please? How to enter it in Ariba if that's allowable. So if something is over, we do usually say it's okay to go on a 64 discretionary. So it would need to be a 64 as long as the funding actually allows for it. And then as long as you do like the split accounting and the overage is covered on the 64, that would be fine. Or we do have a line item called 64X. If you take away the overage amount and put it on that 64X line item, that would be another way that you could document that. 11-hour rule. So the 11-hour rule is an addition to the travel status requirement. If they meet the 11-hour rule, there's no way to you can't just meet the 11-hour rule to get reimbursed for per diem. You have to meet the travel status as well as the 11-hour rule. Those go hand in hand. I can't choose one over the other. So that's why the 11-hour rule would not get them lunch for that virtual attendance. Do I understand you correctly? Seattle area per diem increased from 76 to 79 per day. Yeah, that was as of October 1st. So those are the new rates that just came out. Those are effective starting October 1st of 2021, and those will expire on September 30th of 2022. So the domestic per diems always release on October 1st of each year. So, and then sometimes it goes up, sometimes it remains the same, but Seattle did go up. We're now up to 79 per day. The new breakdown is on the website, and the system has been updated with those updates. And then can you refresh what the 11-hour rule means? So the 11-hour rule is an additional requirement to travel status for being eligible for per diem. So per diem covers the cost of meals and lodging. And the 11-hour rule just pertains to single day trips. So you may not have worked with the 11-hour rule a whole lot because mostly people who are getting per diem are staying overnight and all that. So the 11-hour rule is, let's say you're going somewhere that's pretty far away, but it's a single day trip. You're going out to that business location and you're returning home that same day. We have what's called the 11-hour rule that you have to meet to be eligible for meal per diem for that day. So lodging wouldn't really be considered because there's no overnight anyway, so you wouldn't need lodging. This is for single day trips. So the 11-hour is calculated from when you leave from your home or your official duty station, and then you can count any of the travel time until when you return back to your home or your duty station. And then what needs to be separated from the time is just any time stop for meals. So typically department would like ask them, how long do you take for lunch? They'll say an hour. You separate out the hour, but include any of the travel time, any of the working time. If that was 11 or more hours, then they qualify for a meal per diem that day. And that's in addition to the 50-mile rule. So that could be more than 50 miles away from their home and duty station. So that's the travel status requirement. So single day trips, travel status plus 11-hour rule equals meals for that, meal per diem for that day. Alrighty. So I want to keep us moving along. So we will get to the other questions because we still have another portion of the main presentation, and that's for finance transformation. So do feel free to keep asking questions, and we'll still answer these once that's over. But I do want to transition to our next section. So we have Jason Calavas here, and I'll let him introduce himself, and he's going to go over some program updates from finance transformation. So without further ado, let me pass it off to him. Hey, Jason, are you there? Oh, won't let him start his video or mic. Let me look at the settings. That might be on our end. 1 second. Let me make you a co-host. That should give you all the functionality. Let me know if that works. There we go. Perfect. Sorry about that.
Glad to see everybody today. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Well, thanks, Kelly, for inviting me to the Travel Forum. Thanks to you for being interested, all of you travel folks. So I know this is not our first time at the Travel Forum, or UW Finance Transformation's first time at the Travel Forum, but in the interest of knowing that this is often a rotating group of folks, I wanted to start with just some quick bullets on what UW Finance Transformation is. For those of you who don't know yet, I'll go through this quickly though, and then we'll get into kind of the meat of where we are with the program today. So first off, why are we doing finance transformation? Just very quickly, and I'm sure most of you have heard this in some way, shape, or form. The UW's current financial accounting systems were created in 1974. So at this point, nearly 50 years ago, to run what was at the time 552 million institution. Today, by contrast, UW's revenues are 8 billion, much, much more. So we had a lot more financial information to keep track of, a lot more transactional information to keep track of. Currently, we are working across the University of Washington in 850 peer or side systems, which I think, as many of you know, kind of range the gamut from institution-wide systems or university organization-wide systems like Ariba, like FAS, but also include very, very local and nuanced systems like the spreadsheet that some people maintain simply to keep track of local travel. And that includes 900 integrations between FAS, between the EDW, between Ariba, between et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what all of that means ultimately is that we do not at the university have today a single source of truth or any real transparency. And so we're moving to Workday as our source of truth to create a single system of core financial record. And then another reason for doing this is we've documented before, University of Washington as a whole, on the academy side at any rate, spends twice as much as our peer institutions, other R1 institutions, other public land grant institutions, et cetera, as those peers on procurement and supply chain activities. We have over 1,000 UW employees that do finance work that's not considered core to their job. They do it in an ancillary or secondary fashion. And so we're moving towards some element of shared services or shared environment, which is an operating model that will really allow UW employees more to focus on mission critical work. What's transforming? And again, I don't think this is new to most of you, but just to be sure, we are, as an institution, replacing several large enterprise, finance, and supply chain systems across both the academy and medicine. That includes things like MyFD or FAS, Ariba, and on the medicine side, McKesson, with a modern cloud-based financial system that is Workday. We are redesigning or reconfiguring most or several financial-related business processes, things that relate to procurement, to grants, to managing cash, to how we record and report on our funds. And then we're sharing work across units where appropriate by standing up a new operating model. Some of you will be familiar with shared environments from your local school, college, or organization already. In some cases, this will be a somewhat new concept. So our implementation timeline, we are here where the big orange bar is. We've made it through already in the gray plan, architect validation, and the first stages of configure and prototype. And what that means is that we've laid the groundwork for the program. We've collected requirements and established what the program's scope, schedule, budget is. We've spent some time validating those decisions, as well as what we expect the future state to look like through a series of design workshops and confirmation sessions. And here we are in configure and prototype, where we take those business decisions that had been made, configure Workday, and prototype out what new system configurations, system integrations, and system design looks like. That includes things like defining our operating model, really dialing in on what it means to work in some sort of shared environment and how Workday gets managed in the future, maintained, kept up to date, made sure that the system itself is running. We're defining a strategy for testing and preparation. So in other words, how do we strategically make sure that all systems are go and everyone is trained when we get to go live? How do we get through our test stage, in other words? And we're launching in the organizational change management world, our change agents, which is a great time for folks who haven't been hugely deeply involved in the program yet to start to get a little bit more awareness, to start to see a little bit more, let's call it under the hood, and to start to get ready. All of what configure and prototype does, what it leads us to, is our test phase, getting ready for test. And in test, what we have is user acceptance testing, which is to say a bunch of people digging into from all across the university, I should say, digging into the software as it's been configured, both Workday and other future state software, including the current software that is being integrated or connected to Workday. And then we get into train the trainer and, of course, end user training as we march towards a July 1, 2023 go live. So where we are right now, again, about 3 months into configure and prototype. Our goals, as I said, are really completely in alignment with preparation for the test stage. So what that means specifically is building and refining new technology solutions for testing. As I said, that includes Workday, but it also includes integrations and other systems that align with or exist outside of or as peers to Workday. We finalize what the new operating model will look like, begin shifting towards it, some pilots, providing the groundwork for leaders to work through their shared environments. We're going to spend most of configure and prototype designing our training curricula. So what that means is that over the course of the next 6 months, we really dig into what the future state will look like, how we're going to make sure that training is provided so that when we roll into test, we can have confidence that we're training on everything that users will need to know. And then, as I mentioned, we're identifying change agents now and power users early in 2022. And those folks are the folks who will be participating in that testing, participating in training, participating as trainers, or getting trained to train the trainer. It's a lot of T's there. And really spending some time digging in and making sure that the system and its configurations and its business processes are working as intended and are easily able to be understood and used in the future. So our program status right now, in the interest of complete transparency, honesty, and full disclosure, we are program status yellow, and that's, as you can guess by the stoplight, on the kind of green, yellow, red, red, yellow, green scale, which kind of puts us right in the middle. We are not green, all systems go, but we are also not red, stop, we have a major or critical issue. What yellow means in this particular case is there's a slight risk for our scope, our schedule, and our budget. Overall status is improving. The biggest risk, I'll jump to the last bullet there, the biggest risk that we're facing right now is recruiting and retaining program staff. I know that that is an issue that is true all across the University of Washington. It's not strictly limited to finance transformation. And if the news I watch is to be believed, that is actually an issue that is true all across most industries, as folks are both taking some real time in COVID to reassess what they want to do, and also expressing some concern about physical work or physically being present at work and so on. So it's certainly hurting us in the program, our ability to recruit and retain staff, but we're working through that pretty robustly as we can. And the staff that we do have are by and large phenomenal. I'll also note, for those of you who've been paying attention for a while, you will have seen a change in our go live. We had at one point been targeting a July 1, 2022 go live. The Board of Regents recently approved a 1-year extension, which is why I mentioned a July 1, 2023 go live earlier. And that helps us mitigate, I should say, the scope and schedule problems that we were facing. What we were trying to do was cram quite a lot into a very narrow amount of time. And we faced the question of, do we want to be able to launch the program successfully, correctly, and to meet the needs of our users? Or do we want to be able to crunch it and hit the original time projected? We determined, and the Board of Regents agreed with us, that we should do this right rather than do it fast. I see that there's a question pop up in chat, so give me 1 second just to take a look at that question. Are we going to have hands-on training prior to the go live and not just PowerPoint presentations? Yes. Full stop, unequivocally, yes. Let me expand on that a little bit. Our training is going to include some amount of PowerPoint presentation to make sure that folks are up to speed on what Workday involves, but it will also involve hands-on login, hands to keyboards, as we say, log into Workday, go through some scenarios, make sure that you have comfort navigating through the software, that you can find what you need to find, that you have the tools that you need to have, and know where they are so that you can complete business processes in Workday. You'll get practice doing that in a fully configured Workday environment prior to go live. All right, I answered that. Moving on a little bit from there, some accomplishments and next steps. So talking about that kind of fully configured Workday prior to go live, one of our recent accomplishments is that we have built an initial Workday Finance prototype with UW data. And what I mean by that is we have effectively taken a demo or copy of Workday as a piece of software, all of the finance modules that Workday has, and used a copy of, I think this was 6 months ago now, 6 months ago UW data to vet and validate that UW Finance data would fit within the Workday ecosystem as we had it configured. That data, obviously, as I said, that's like approximately 6 months old data. We're going live, approximately 2 years from now. So that data is going to get refreshed and updated so that we go live with actually up-to-date data. But this is an important step in validating some of the early work that we've done and making sure that we have a system that is capable of having people log into it to test and to get training on before go live. We completed 3 rounds of system configuration sprints. Sprints in air quotes, kind of a term of art there. Basically what that means, each sprint sees more and more of the Workday system configured according to our business decisions, configured according to UW. And that ranges from decisions like, okay, well, this particular item needs to be routed from person in this role to person in that role to person in that role, and that's the path, we need an approval cutoff for a rec at this many dollars. And in some cases, that's as simple as, you know what, this form is going to be easier to read if we put alternate color bands going white and gray instead of having every row be white. So configuration covers a whole lot of those things. We completed the first 3 sprints. There are 3 more to go, and all of those configuration sprints will be done by the end of this calendar year. So we're looking to finish all of those sprints by the end of December so that we can finalize config and prototype and then move on to test. And then we also hosted a Workday technical conference a couple months ago for those technical folks who are working on their local systems and need to either do an integration, an adjustment to that system, or retirement. We hosted our first Workday core concept session to talk about the foundation data model in Workday, one of those basic understanding things. And I don't have it here, but we also hosted our first broad University of Washington Finance Transformation Roadshow to talk about overall where the program is. Some of this content is taken from that. So you might have seen some of this at the Roadshow. If you haven't seen either the core concepts or the Roadshow, I have links to videos of both of them at the end of the slide deck. Highly encouraged to watch. They're about an hour each. And I think they really add a lot of context. What's coming next? We'll distribute a change readiness assessment to UW employees. The heads up email for that assessment just went out earlier today. So you'll probably see that in your inboxes. The survey itself comes out a week from now. And our goal with that survey is to come to understand kind of where you are and what you know about UW Finance Transformation and what you still need to know. So this is the first of 3 surveys, and it's one of the ways that we measure how well we're doing our job of making sure that people are brought along on the journey of finance transformation. Excuse me, knowing, of course, today, you're not far along on the journey. Training hasn't started, for example, so you haven't been trained yet. That's, of course, true. So we do not expect anybody to say, yes, I'm very well trained. Obviously, you're. That will happen later. We are going to continue system configuration sprints. As I said, there are 3 more sprints ahead of us, and we will prepare for end-to-end testing, vital time in test when we're asking participation from all across the university to make sure that we get this right, and we'll continue to prepare for shared environments. I see another couple of questions have popped up in the chat, so give me 1 second to read through those. Will there be enough support to answer our questions, not like when Payroll Workday HRP went live, that people were not able to get their questions or problems answered right away? We're really working hard towards making sure that we do have a robust support system. Part of that, and I just had this discussion yesterday, is we're looking to make sure that change managers are going to be in training as well, so that change managers are fully equipped to answer questions and provide support post go live. We're also looking at having a deeper and broader group of change agents and power users who are those local experts who are going to be there to help. And in truth, we're starting our full block of training a fair bit earlier. So we're making sure that folks are really brought into the program, the system, and the training, the things that they need to know a little bit ahead of where we were with HRP. I was here during HRP. I wasn't part of that team, but I was, let's call it a customer of HRP, an end user. And I'm well aware of a lot of the problems that happened at HRP launch. We really took away a lot of lessons learned. We're trying to do it different this time around. I see another question here. How often does program status get assessed and updated? We update our status at a local level bi-weekly. And when I say local level, what I mean is each team within the program updates our status, and that rolls up to an overall program status update. But at a larger level, Blue Crane, which is the state of Washington's assessor for IT programs, they assess and update our status monthly, and we report our status, our overall program status monthly to the Board of Regents and publicly, I guess, every month. And Chema asks, could I explain what shared service is about? I have an idea, but not sure. Sure. So really what we're looking at in shared services at the absolute simplest level, what you all know to be true is that the person who makes a request and the person who approves that request cannot be the same person. Kelly was actually just talking about that in terms of travel approvals a minute before, before I started. And really, at the most basic level for shared environments is that kind of question. How do we make sure that work is distributed so that there are the appropriate steps of approvals, the appropriate steps of division of labor, and that folks are focused on the right work, that mission critical work? What that means, and forgive me for speaking a little bit at a high level on this, it's because some of our shared service work is still in process. So I can't speak too much to details because we're still figuring out those details right now as part of config and prototype. But what that means at a pretty high level is we're expecting most local schools, colleges, organizations, et cetera, to have some form of shared environment where shared work is done. For those of you who are in, for example, the College of Arts and Sciences, this idea, or School of Medicine for that matter, this idea will be pretty familiar. School of Medicine has ABC shared services, College of Arts and Sciences has College of Arts and Sciences shared services. And for each of those schools, School of Medicine, College of Arts and Sciences, that shared environment, that shared service provides some amount of service and support to departments or divisions throughout the college or throughout the school, right? There are some tasks that they take on or some portions of full business processes that they take on. Oh, okay, well, I create a requisition for X item, or I create a request for X occurrence, or a grant space, for an approval on travel, for an approval on a purchase, for an approval on a hire, perhaps. And that goes over to the shared service in College of Arts and Sciences. That goes over to the shared environment, the ABC shared services in School of Med. So broadly, that's what we're talking about. Next time I come to talk, I hope to have some more detail to share about what our shared environments will look like in the future. So tools and resources, though, in the meanwhile, things that you can do if you want to stay up to date now. So for one, here we have our Change Champions Network. It is a SharePoint site. Everybody at the university has access to it. And it's one of the key ways to stay informed on the program. We have some detailed fact sheets. So for specific questions on, hey, I am a travel officer. How is procurement for travel? How is procurement in general going to work in the future? Jason, you've mentioned the foundation data model a couple of times. What is that? I have a question about shared services that, I'd really like to dive in a little bit more on some of the things that Jason just said here. We have a bunch of detailed fact sheets to explain what we mean by some of those things. They're kind of one-pagers for you to read. We have, in terms of shared environments, the Administrator's Guide to the Shared Environment. It is a very detailed, 200 pages, I think, just shy of 200 pages, look at the work that we've done in shared environments to date, where we are now, what we're expecting in the future, as well as some idea on what future state business processes will look like. It is, for one, very big. It is, for two, certainly not for everybody, but it's an interesting place to dive in if you have some questions. I guarantee you it'll raise some more questions. We also have end-to-end process details. So I mentioned, we're talking about things like procurement, payment, managing cash, grant awards, and closing out on grants, recording and reporting financial transactions. We have details on all of the end-to-end processes the program is covering, as well as what we're looking at and who's doing work for each of those, the scope of them. I mentioned the foundation data model already. And then finally, the full list of system remediation and retirements there. So if you have a question about a particular system, especially one that might be local to your organization, to your enterprise, to your school, to your college, say, what's happening with that system? Wonderful place to go and find details. So that's right up there in the enterprise systems carrot, top of the website. So please go to the Change Champions Network. And if you have any questions that come out of your look at the Change Champions Network, email me, email UW-FT Ask, and we'll make sure your questions get answered. The other thing I'll share, of course, is that we have UW Finance Transformation website. That's our public-facing website. So there includes some links not only to UW-FT Ask and to our Change Network, but also some details on who's involved in the program, who is our governance and our sponsors, how can you sign up for things like our newsletter, which comes out monthly, is a great way to stay informed month over month on what's happening in the program. And also our Transformation Insight blog also comes out monthly and has some good insight from the folks who are working on the program, things that they're struggling with and the things that they're working towards on any given month. We change topics for both newsletter and Insights blog every month so that there's really always something fresh. Link here in this slide to subscribe, but also, again, you can email UW FT Ask, or you can find that link on our website. Finally, I encourage you all to reach out and respond. I've said this a couple of times, and I really stand by this. This program is not a black box. If it is looking like one, that is very much not on purpose, and we are looking to open the doors to the box. It was a butchered metaphor, but I hope you all stayed with me on that one. If you have questions, learn who your unit readiness lead is. That's someone in your local organization who's pretty in tune to what's happening in finance transformation. Reach out to your change manager. We have overall 8 change managers across the academy and medicine on the program, plus myself, each one of them responsible for a portfolio of schools, colleges, and administrative units. And so they've come to know finance leadership in your organization pretty well, as well as the structure of the organization. They're queued up to answer questions that are specific to you. Send questions if you have broad ones to UW FT Ask. We'll make sure you get an answer. And then finally, that change readiness survey is coming out a week from tomorrow. So please do take that survey, give us some feedback. And that just gets me, oh, geez, I'm so sorry, I forgot about resources. I mentioned this already, but here are some pretty direct links: fact sheets, end-to-end process areas, foundation data model, etc. Also, we have our events calendar and links to our core concepts and roadshow. Again, these are just provided so you don't have to go digging for links. I know I hate it when folks send me to dig for links, so I thought it might be nice to just provide some links to you all so you don't have to dig. And that's the end of my presentation. So I am open to any other questions, but I don't see any new ones in the chat here. Okay. Well, I will stop sharing. And if you do, as I say, if you do have any questions, please do send them over to UW FT Ask or send them to me directly. I am here and the whole team is to help and support you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. Appreciate you stopping by. Yeah, like you mentioned, feel free to ask any questions, and we'll be sticking around for a couple more minutes as well. So if you have any more travel related questions as well as FT, we'll be here. So feel free to ask any questions. But just kind of like wrapping up the meeting as a reminder, yeah, we'll be sending out the recording and the slides usually a couple days after the meeting, so you can expect to see those. Reminder to take those surveys. We got the training survey, the UW sustainability survey. And on that post-meeting recap, we'll include any links that were provided in the presentation. We usually do that, so that way you have direct access. You'll have all those different links, and we'll include some of those links from FT as well. But yeah, if there are any other questions, yeah, we're getting towards the end. Not a question, but thank you all for this webinar. Yeah, of course, anytime. We appreciate the feedback.